All right, we'll give people the usual 2 minutes, and we'll start at 2 minutes past the hour once everyone's had a chance to log in. All right, 1 more minute until we get started. See a few more people trying to log in right now.
Excuse me.
All right, I think we have critical mass. Let's get this going. Cool. So as usual, we'll split into Warpcast Dev updates and Farcaster Dev updates. There's 2 sections out here. Starting with the first one, I want to touch on a few points. So want to give a little bit of color on how we're thinking about timelines for all of this stuff as we get closer and closer to migration. So high level context is the migration is sort of a very messy process. We're moving data from this one system in flight to this other very complicated distributed system in flight. And there's just lots of moving pieces that I think are going to be creaky as we move. And there's high volatility in both ways, right? Sometimes we're going to say things take a couple of days and they end up taking 3 or 4. Sometimes we think things end up taking a lot less than we planned for. So we want to try to maintain as much certainty as we can for folks, because I know a lot of y'all are planning migrating your apps around these timelines, but we do want to call out that there will be some volatility. Our approach to doing this is to try to get to 80 to 90% confidence deadlines. We'll pick the thing that is we think we can reasonably hit and we think that we can push the team towards, versus the approach of sandbagging our deadlines and adding 2 extra weeks to everything. Because the downside of that is if we're not able to launch quickly, we're not able to start testing and building the next features. And one of the benefits of being able to launch quickly as things are ready is that we can get moving on the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. And that actually helps us get the whole hub timeline moved up by a month or so, because we're able to move faster, test faster, and move across these serial pieces quickly. Just wanted to pause and just get feedback from folks on are there any things that we can be doing to make this process easier for y'all as we go through the rest of this migration?
I think, I don't know what you want to get into it, but I think it's people expect, or at least I always expect from my experience, that, sometimes you miss a date, which is fine. Things take longer. I think the struggle for us on the recent communication was we were told the date slipped by a couple of weeks, but then, oh no, we're moving it forward, which is harder to readjust for, because if you're planning around kind of being told that the date is March 31st, and then suddenly it's March 21st instead, 10 days earlier, and you got to change everything and cause a scramble that's, kind of unanticipated. It's kind of it's if, let's say, Facebook was launching Facebook Connect and told 1,000 developers, hey, Facebook Connect is coming on March 31st, and then they go, oops, actually March 15th. Then those who are, ready to kind of jump on it, but others, people might already be, fully occupied. So I just think it'd be really good for us to have really good sync on these things, and kind of once we say, okay, this is the date, if it's been pushed out, not to then push it earlier.
So 2 thoughts on that, just on where we are. One is, I think there's 2 kinds of changes, right? Changes that break other applications that require people to scramble, and changes that are sort of backwards compatible. Things that hey, apps don't need to upgrade, things keep working as is as we move forward. So I think on backward compatible breaking changes, we're very sensitive to breaking any kind of integrations with folks. And even with your team, I remember Aman needed an extra week. We're very happy to move things around, and we want to be super flexible there. I think with non-backwards compatible changes, if we were to take the approach of saying, hey, if something gets shipped early, we're not going to actually move this forward, that would actually significantly drag out the hub timelines. And I think it slows us down. So the cost to the protocol and all the developers is, hey, this is going to take an additional 2 months to ship because we now have to wait 2 weeks for this thing to roll out before we can start serializing the next piece. I also think that, like, we're not in the state where like hundreds of apps on Farcaster are competing with each other for user base and clientele, and launching a day earlier is going to make like a meaningful difference on things. And so we want, like, our perspective right now is we want to keep trying moving these things forward quickly and launching as is. And there might be a day or two where something ships earlier, and that's generally good because we can start testing the pipes, fixing bugs and whatnot as we get closer to the launch date.
Yeah, so I guess going forward, we just assume that dates have a plus or minus buffer to it and just deal with it.
Yeah, and again, I think like if there's breaking compatibility changes, we will be like super careful about like communicating with everybody, making sure things go back and forth. Like the cast hash migration, I think is a good example of one that is painful for people. And I think on things that are backwards compatible, we'll sort of assume that, hey, we might ship dates and there'll be a plus or minus to our dates.
Just one last thing on this. I don't want to be harping you guys, but like we're all in this together at this point, right? So we're all building, and we're all very like. Whenever I talk to an investor, for instance, the first thing they always ask me is, how dependent are you on the Farcaster team? And I say very, because, until we had this thing out there on mainnet, we're all really relying on the hard work that you and your team are doing. I would say that in one of the messages, you guys said that you had the team work the weekend to build it faster. So send a message in the dev chat and say, hey guys, just a heads up, we're having our team work the weekend to see if we can move this feature up. And then we all at least get thinking, okay, we can absorb that and think about what that means for us. But we got that after the fact versus being part of the process.
Sure. Look, to be super clear, Jason, I don't think we knew over the weekend that it was going to ship sooner. Again, going back to the high volatility, I think this is one of those things where like on Monday morning, we're like, okay, where are we on this? It looks like we might be able to launch a little bit sooner. And we actually did share it early. It's just, honestly, early seems late. Like from your perspective, like I think early seems late, but we are sharing things as they happen. There's like very little delay between when we know something's going to ship early and when that message gets puts on the Telegram channel.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. Like you guys have been like for the longest time must have been building this stuff, like hoping somebody wants to use it. And now it's like, okay, we're all here. So just like, I just say over communicate as best possible, please. Like, let us like, more is better in this case. Like as much communication as possible, we can absorb it.
Totally.
Yeah, Varun, can I just add? So first of all, Jason, I know it's snark intended. Like if that came across as passive aggressive, that's my fault. So let me just publicly acknowledge that. The secing thing,
I think I come across as aggressive, so it's okay.
It's fine. I'm a big boy. I can handle it. The thing I think worth just calling out is we basically have, if everything goes on schedule and the more we can pull stuff up, the closer we get to hitting this. We have basically 6 weeks before, if we can actually get to the May 1st deadline and hubs are permissionless. I think the amount of reliance on the Warpcast team goes down by an order of magnitude. Obviously, that we're going to still continue working on hubs and the protocol, but if we can get something to a working state, like the level of like all of this coordination that we're doing right now, and yes, we can improve it, but like our like real focus is to get to a place where this network is as permissionless as possible, modulo mainnet, modulo gated signups. But like getting hubs out is such a huge milestone in terms of like, you don't have to care what we think as much, because like you're going to have the same access to the network that we do.
Yeah. So I think we get this now. So now this is good. We had this like we'll look back on this like a year from now and say, okay, remember that time we had the little hiccup? It is so clear from you guys right now that hubs is the prime directive. And so other dates things might move around because the hubs are what's going to be the critical thing. Got it. Totally clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think once we're in a hub world, Varun, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a plan for like a 12-week cycle for hub upgrades that you're borrowing from Rust, and like we're going to iterate on that. But the communication there is going to be on a pretty regular cadence, right, Varun?
Yep. Yeah. Look, I think to Dan's point, once we're on this like decentralized world, then it gets a lot easier. Things are a lot more predictable. There's a fixed schedule of how things go. I think we're in this messy interworld of going from V1 to V2, where there's just a lot of like breaking backwards compatible changes as we're trying to set a foundation for the future.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate the dialogue.
Yeah, and appreciate the feedback.
Cool. Moving on to signer requests. So signer requests are in beta today. We have the docs. they seem to be working fine. I think most folks who have played around with them have had no issue getting things set up, getting things broadcast. The state of the world, just to recap for folks who are jumping into the conversation now, is you can ask for a signer, which you can think of as like an OAuth token to post messages for a user. You'll be able to go through that flow. You'll be able to see what the flow looks like for a user, and you'll be able to get that token back. And next week, we're targeting Monday, but next week we'll actually have a hub where you can send that token, and once it successfully lands, you can then follow up by sending all kinds of different messages, and they will also land successfully. And we're making a few small UI tweaks to that screen on the Warpcast APIs, just to make that screen easier to understand for users. But overall, the feature seems to be working, at least, and I think AlphaCaster actually got it up and running already. So cool. So ask yours, if you run into any bugs, have any feedback over the next couple of days, please let us know. We'd love to get everything patched. And then hopefully by next week, people can start broadcasting messages to the one hub that we have up and running. Next update is on the hash migration. So we managed to get out the hash cast mappings for a few of the folks that asked for it. So we have the full CSV files. We're planning to move ahead with this right after the dev call. So Shane's going to do the cutover. And as part of this cutover, we're still going to return both the V1 and V2 hashes in the response package, but the default hash in the hash property is going to switch from V1 to V2. So this is the first sort of soft breaking change from moving over entirely to V2, and call it a week from today, we'll cut back and we'll remove all the V1 hashes as well. So everything's just V2 going forward. URLs, like any warpcast.com URLs, will support both hashes for some amount of time, probably like 6 months or so, and eventually we'll phase out the older hashes. And we expect this to go live right after the call at 11 a.m. So there'll be, call it a minute or two of downtime while we switch things over, and the APIs are cutting over. Any questions from folks or any concerns here?
Varun, when are we looking at the next migration timeline? Like, when are you planning to cut off the V1 hashes coming in the API response?
Tentatively, we're going to do a week from today, so next Thursday, but this is something we can be pretty easily flexible on if people need more or less time.
Sure. Yeah, based on the latest changes or the development on the static files, we'll again regroup on that and we'll let you know, like, if we need more time on that.
Cool. Sounds good to us. We'll keep the Telegram channel updated if we change any timelines there. Question on Docker image from the chat. It's on the roadmap, not this week or next week, but we're planning to set up like a Docker hub and put an image there, like a official image so people can pull that down. So on the roadmap, just not going to get there for a couple of weeks. Warpcast web client. So I posted about this on Farcaster yesterday, but we are imminently close to launch where you can start writing from the Warpcast web client. Should have no impact on the API or any other things, but you'll now be able to log in on the web and start writing messages from there.
Varun,
Cool.
It's maybe worth pointing out our login flow is not using signers. It might look like it, but like we're just using our own QR code stuff that we use for desktop and mobile, right?
Yeah. Sorry, is there something you wanted to click in on there, Dan, for the?
No. Just if when people see it, the login flow, it's actually different than the signer flow. It's like worth delineating.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's my first question. It's like, is it the first use of the signer flow, or is it your own proprietary?
No,
Yeah,
we basically manage the signer on the back end ourselves, similar to what most apps are doing. And this is more of a handoff the API token between two different clients. So desktop and web are using the same client. So it's a much simpler auth flow that we've got going. Cool. Switching over to Farcaster Dev updates. There's a few questions on here that came in from the community that we want to talk about. First one, Jason, I think you want to talk about like cast formatting.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to like dive into the embeds. We've been looking through the specifications line and just had some questions. Like the examples that were given are like with like very like short examples. So let's say it's like the cast contains Farcaster.xyz and the embed also contains Farcaster.xyz. And I'm just wondering like how still a little unclear from our side. Let's say if there's a cast and there's like an image and a URL, like how that's going to be interpreted exactly.
So I'll talk about what's going to happen like let's call it next week, once the hubs in V2 are out there, and then what'll happen over time. So right now, the the protocol allows for 2 embeds. So you can put 2 links in there pointing to any images, any website or whatever. And the expectation is that clients will be able to render those 2 links along with a cast in whatever manner they choose to render that, right? You can have it up and down, you can have it side by side, whatever. There's no positional information, so we sort of assume everyone will just put it at the bottom. It doesn't say that it's at a specific point or whatever. Any URLs in the body that are not in the embeds, like if you just put a URL as text in the body, the expectation is that clients are not going to expand that. Obviously, clients can do whatever they would like and expand more if they'd like, but the sort of expected behavior is only those 2 in the embeds are expanded, and anything not put in the embed is just, you know, the user just wanted the link there, but they didn't want it actually opened up. Warpcast specifically, like our clients right now only have 1 URL, so they're just going to pick the first URL and expand it. This is more a shortcoming. We actually want to go and fix this feature and actually make it support 2, but at launch we'll only have 1 for now, and then over time we'll go and add 2, and we'll have 2 things show up side by side.
One follow-up question on that. So for the existing cast which were created in the Farcast client, let's say if I had added an image, so right now it is at the end of the text. Now, if I fetch the data from the hub after, let's say, a week from now, for the older cast, will I see the Imgur link in the text as well as in the embeds, or it will only be present in the embeds?
I'll let Shane jump in here to correct me in case I'm wrong on any of the details, because he did the migration. But I believe what we did for all existing casts is we did a best effort pass to go back and reprocess everything and say, hey, here's a set of things that should show up in the embeds, and we moved them over to the embeds. There may be some small 0.1% of casts where the intent was ambiguous or things were messy, and we arbitrarily moved one but not the other into the embed state.
So just to get it right, so it is, so the intention was that it should not be a part of the text.
That's right. Yeah. If you want it to be expanded, it should be in the embeds thing. And if you just want it to show up as text, it should be in the text field. And that's how it'll work. And again, like one thing I want to delineate on, this is specifically the Farcaster Hub APIs, right? Or like how you talk to the hubs. If you're talking to Warpcast and you just send Warpcast like a string that has a URL in it, Warpcast APIs have no notion of embeds. We just kept these APIs super simple so people can continue writing to them with like simpler applications. And Warpcast will make its own decision of how to take your text string and what goes into the embed and what doesn't. And that's based on the logic that we've written and shared. So if you're working directly with Farcaster hubs, you got to be careful to put it in the embeds. If you're working with Warpcast APIs, you'll just give us text and we'll do some smarts to auto figure out which one should go in there for you.
So just a couple of scenarios. So let's say a user writes a 200 byte cast and has 2 links in their cast as they write it. Is the expected behavior that we would put the 2 links in the embed or in the cast?
Assuming you wanted both those links to be expanded as like open graph attachments in the embeds.
Okay. Very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions on that? One way to also think about it is, I think we're going to have like you'll see how other clients do it and how we do it, but like Twitter doesn't actually allow this today, right? Like Twitter allows multiple images, but it doesn't allow multiple links from an open graph standpoint. Whereas if you, for example, a Slack post, if you were to put 2 links, they like actually have like a smaller open graph approach when you do multiple links. And so I think like it'll just be dynamic, but you could imagine like an open graph link with an image, like so there's going to be UI experimentation here.
Yeah. So we've just been doing a POC internally, and we found that like most of the casts that people are creating are going to have links in them, and we just want to make sure how we provide them into the hubs.
Cool. Yeah, and Shane shared a gist. I think we put it on Telegram, but he also dropped it in this chat over here, which walks through the exact code that we're using to convert and generate and insert mentions and links and all of this stuff. So this should provide a good reference point, and we'll have this in the hub documentation as well next week when that launches.
Okay. Aman, did you have any other questions on this?
Yeah, I think the questions was more about the links and the Imgur images, which I think we are clear with.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, awesome. So again, just to recap timelines really quickly before I talk about the contract stuff. We expect to have 1 public hub early next week. shooting for Monday, but depends on when we can get it stood up. The hubs are basically running internally. We just want to get the infrastructure really stable so that when we do deploys, there's zero downtime and your APIs against and calls against that hubs will keep working well. So next week, we should have one hub that has all the data piping in from Warpcast, and anyone else who has signers can also pipe in data to that hub, and all of that should settle, and you can subscribe to changes from that hub. Later that week, we're going to start what we call a hub testnet. So this is a fully isolated hub network. It's not going to be connected to this mainnet hub. It's going to have dummy data. So we'll have a script that's just posting like dummy data to the hub every hour or so, and there's just arbitrary data syncing. And everyone who wants to run a hub, we encourage you to start running the testnet hub so that we can figure out any issues with networking, any of these other challenges that come up as hubs are appearing. And we'll try to battle test that. If all goes well, late next week, in the most optimistic case, I think the following Monday, we can then go ahead and launch the hub mainnet, and we can actually allow other people to peer with our hub. It's going to be an authenticated process, so you'll have to know the key, the public key of the hub that you're connecting to. Each hub has its public key that it generates, and hubs will only peer with other hubs that they know about. That's just to ensure that as we're scaling up, we don't accidentally have someone spin up like 100 hubs and take down the network. And we want to gradually go from like 10 to 20 to eventually get to 100. And we'll test that out over the course of the month. And then if we feel like we're in a good spot by May 1st, we'll be able to say, hey, hubs are permissionless. Anyone can spin up a hub and connect. So just to recap, first public hub next week, anyone with a signer can push messages into it and it should work. Testnet later next week, and then mainnet, where you can run your own hub and have up to 10 hubs starting the week after, on the week of the 27th. Any questions from folks on that? Cool. On a sort of related note to hub running, Greg pointed out that Railway is going to now support gRPC and make it easy to run hubs on Railway. We don't yet have a guide for how to do that, but hopefully that will make it a lot easier for people to spin up hubs on infrastructure and get them up and running. Next call out, there's going to be a community call tonight on Clubhouse at 5 p.m. Pacific. Dan's going to post the link on Farcaster. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is going to be a private Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, I think it's just you have to have a link to get to it. So I'm not, using the Clubhouse graph. I'm not using the Twitter graph. I'm just using Farcaster. So it's kind of like a hacky version of testing out if this makes sense to do on a regular basis. Because this call, I think, has definitely been useful for the developer side of things. But I think it could be useful just to have a live call every so often with just the broader community of folks on Farcaster.
Yep. So agenda is more casual. There's no formal like here's what we're discussing, but it's an open forum for people to ask questions and Dan and I to talk about what's top of mind for us.
Yeah, we consider doing it on Lonely, but the chat is a little unhinged, so we want to have it a little bit more mellow. So we're going to do it on Clubhouse to start. Cool. Last topic, I posted this on Farcaster and got a bunch of good responses from people on different approaches for how we're thinking about L1s versus L2s. Just to frame the problem really quickly for folks that are just catching up, Farcaster contracts right now on Gurley, things are working fine. Gurley is free, everything is great. But at some point, we actually have to move to a stable, secure network so that FIDs can be credibly decentralized. And we sort of have these two contracts that we need to move, right? You have FIDs, which are your decentralized identifier, and it's super important that these are on a blockchain that has decent security properties and decent decentralization properties so that no one can take the ID from you. And we have FNames, and FNames are a little different. They're a governed namespace. There are rules around what you can have and what you can't have, et cetera. But it's important that these names are on an L2 that has like a reasonable auction market and interoperability with ERC 721s and so on. The default plan as of now is, hey, let's launch on mainnet. That's kind of the strategy number one. I think it's unsustainable in the long run. Mainnet fees will eventually increase. The network will get more and more expensive. And at some point, registrations will become very expensive. And this is not going to be the right long-term home. And so the other options explore a bunch of different questions on what can we do today to make that cheaper? Could we put different contracts on different networks? Could we launch on mainnet now and migrate to an L2 later to make that significantly cheaper versus all the way down to like rolling our own L2? So we got a bunch of useful feedback. The timeline to make the decision, I think once hubs are out the door, we're going to sit back down, re-examine the state of the world and pick one of these strategies and commit to it. Tentatively, it seems like option 3 is the most viable right now, where we launch an L1 and migrate to an L2 as they get more stable. But we're going to revisit this and call it early June once hubs are out there and stable, and once we've had a chance to play around with the current state of L2s and see where things are.
Cool. I'll be bringing this doc back up again as we get closer to a decision. No decision right now, but a tentative. We are leaning towards option 3, and we'll revisit in June. Any comments or questions on this?
No, sorry. I had another question already, so maybe I'll ask at the end of the call.
Sure. Okay, sounds like people are on board with this plan. Aman, do you want to jump to your question since I think we're at the end? Yep, I think we might
I
have
think
lost.
Aman got dropped somehow. Yeah.
Okay, let me do the shout outs and maybe Aman will get back on before the end of the call. So one, we had a ton of contributions to both the contracts and the hubs. I'm not even going to try reading through this list, but we really, really appreciate your help for all of the stuff that you guys have done, ranging from making our documentation better to getting our test suites up and running. The few asks for help this week are, if you're interested in running a testnet hub, and a mainnet hub eventually, and you're not in the hub runners Telegram chat, please DM me and I'll add you in there. I think we have people from most of the apps in there, but there's still a few people missing. So if you're interested, let's make sure we get you in that group and we're getting the docs and all the things out there. If you want to help us launch on mainnet faster, get the hubs out faster, there's still a lot of open issues of different sizes, ranging from help with documentation all the way down to help with like some big meaty features. If you're interested in working on any of this stuff, DM me. The way we're thinking about like general issues on Farcaster as you're browsing this stuff is, if something has the help wanted flag, that means it's clearly defined, it's scoped, it's ready to go. It's something that we think that someone can just pick up and start running. But if you see issues that are not marked with help wanted that you want to contribute to, you're totally welcome. It's most likely that these issues are earlier in conversation and we'll need to have a back and forth on design. So make sure you talk to whoever opened the ticket about what the right solution is before putting in the work to make a PR, because usually these issues are still not fully fleshed out yet. Awesome. That's all we have as topics for today. I'll turn it over for any general questions that people have on any topics that we covered today or anything that's top of mind for folks.
I think Aman just made it back on the call. Let's see what his question was.
Great.
Yeah, so I got dropped off. So my question was, in the signer flow, will the users have an option right now to revoke their signers, which were added by the clients from the app?
Yes, there's it's actually in the app today. If you go on the mobile app, it's under advanced. There's a manage signer screen where you can actually go and remove a signer if you no longer want to have a signer added there.
And if someone does that, does it mean that all the casts will get removed? And should we also be deleting like all the casts that were added via the signer keys, or like what should be the expectation there?
Yeah, so I would encourage playing around with the UI. So here's how we think about signers, right? They're mostly similar to OAuth tokens and applications with one key difference. Because of the way a hub works, when you sort of no longer want to keep using an application, you just kind of stop. There's no need to go and delete a signer. There's no need to go and disconnect this application, so to speak. We'll just kind of stop posting. But if you think an app has been compromised, like something's actually happened, they're posting malicious content on your behalf and stuff like that, you actually need to go and remove the signer. And the ideal flow of what would happen is when you go and delete a signer is we would take all the messages that you have. We would say, which of these messages would you like to preserve? We'll re-sign them with a new signer, and then we'll go and delete all the messages that you didn't want to preserve, and we'll sort of migrate this over to a new signer that you have in the app. Right now, that functionality is not implemented. So when you go to delete a signer, we give you this warning that says, hey, if you delete the signer, all of these casts and messages will be deleted. We prompt the user to say, like, are you really, really sure you want to do this? There's consequences to this. And we expect that outside of developers, most users aren't using this today unless some app gets compromised or starts posting maliciously on people's behalf. And we expect that, you know, in the next month or so, we'll have the re-sign thing so people can say, hey, I'd like to actually preserve my content. I just don't want them to be under this signer that I gave to app X because I no longer trust app X. I would like to re-sign it under Warpcast or under this other signer over here.
You mentioned in the documentation that in the first release here, there won't be any identification of which app the requesting is. So we want to say, like, do you want to approve Jam as a signer? But you will have it though in the revoke that they'll know this was Jam and this was another app.
So we have today what's called a label, and it's an untrusted label. So when you add the signer, once you say, hey, I've added this, we'll show you like a label. And if you've added Jam in the label, it'll say, hey, we just added the Jam signer, do you think? And then when you go to remove, you'll be able to see the Jam signer and the date. It's an untrusted label. So if someone wanted to be malicious today, they could come in and put in like a fake label that said Jam and trick users into thinking they were Jam. So we actually want to build a trusted flow. I think that's a little more involved and requires another signer process. And that's something we think is actually important to the flow, like having a logo and having the thing there. But that's probably going to take a few more weeks of work to actually get all that fleshed out.
Got it. And do you guys have some kind of guardrails on your side? Like, let's say if whatever, some rogue app just starts completely spamming the network, can you just sign them off entirely, or do you need users to revoke themselves?
The one attack vector that's there, so there's two attack vectors right now. One is somebody just starts generating a bunch of like fake Farcaster deep links and goes around DMing users on Telegram and saying, hey, click this link, and some percentage of people fall for it and click it and say, I would like to approve the signer, and then they can post on that person's behalf. I think over time we'll have like untrusted versus trusted signer flows, where if it comes from an app that's never been seen before, it'll say untrusted, and if it comes from an app that we know has been used, it's trusted, and that'll mitigate it. Right now we have a kill switch to deal with it, so if someone really does something terrible, we can press a button and then the signers will just stop getting added. The second problem is, I think, if like, let's say, if another app gets a signer and they get compromised, like their database creds get leaked, their private keys get leaked, and all users start getting messages posted on their behalf. There's no like one size revoke thing that we have for that today. We're planning. Part of it is like, I think users trusted the other application and they're going to go and post messages on its behalf. But the fix for users is pretty easy. You can just go to your signer management page. You can find the signer that's posting the offending messages and you can click delete, and boom, it's like a one-click fix for all of the messages. Right now, it does have the unfortunate trade-off that legit messages that may have been posted earlier by that signer will get deleted, but in the future, we'll have some kind of flow that says, hey, you can preserve some of these messages. So in the first one, we have sort of this automated kill switch, and the second one, users can self-resolve pretty easily with a couple of clicks.
Mm-hmm.
I would think over time, as the ecosystem matures, like larger clients, like you can think of it as almost like your domain registrar, but like the effectively like where you think of like managing your Farcaster account versus like just signers. You could even imagine like that core ECDSA key, like the actual Farcaster address, is stored in the cloud. And then that company is a custodian, has all the right regulations, but then can do like machine learning based, like, okay, you're posting all of a sudden a bunch of like swear words or pornography or whatever, like this looks like it was compromised, automatically revoke, right? And so you could be asleep and it gets handled for you. I think we got to like start with the skateboard, then the scooter, then the motorcycle, and then work our way up to the car. And so I think that the best thing we can do early on is, given the sophisticated audience that we have on the existing Farcaster, is people should still be cautious, right? Like, it's just like, hey, it's an app that someone on Farcaster that is using, and like you should just trust but verify a little bit. But over time, I think we can make this more akin to the App Store, where, I don't know, not to pick on my mom, but if my mom was to use it, she doesn't have to think about any of that complexity.
Yeah, I'm just more worried like the near term, or like NFT scams or airdrops or whatever. Someone's coming in and they look totally kosher to start, and then they start just spamming something. Yeah.
Alex, I'm not sure I understood the question about the list. This is from the question in chat about, could the person with the list just revoke them all? Cool.
I just mean if someone gave me permission to post on their behalf or whatever, then could I use like that same key to revoke myself? Like,
no, you can't. Signers can't revoke other signers. So only the core ECDSA Ethereum key can revoke signers, and all signers are peers and they can't revoke each other. Cool. Any other questions from folks before we wrap the call for today?
I had raised, like, non-related to any to the signer stuff, but something maybe we can think about like amongst developers over the next few weeks is, we're starting, for instance, in Jam to get signals that other developers might benefit from. So for instance, if someone blocks or reports someone in Jam, that might be helpful for other apps to know as well. Same thing, like, if someone blocks someone or reports someone on Warpcast, I don't think necessarily in the next couple of weeks, but over the next couple of months, we might want to think about a way of pulling those signals together, especially when it comes to malicious users.
Yeah, I think in general, we're very open to that. And I think over time, like clients sharing information about this kind of stuff will actually be useful for spam prevention and a bunch of things. Tactically on mute, the one thing we want to be thoughtful about is I think right now users have some expectation of privacy around that. They don't expect like everyone they've muted to be visible to everyone on the network. So we want to be careful with like the specific mechanism of how we design around that. And maybe there's a thing of like, hey, this person has N mutes versus X, Y, and Z has muted this person X, and that's actually good enough signal for us to operate on.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like from like, let's say, you know, there's a woman on the app and she's getting harassed by some men, and then, you know, she blocks them, and then she goes to another app, and then they're not blocked there, and they follow her. How we can just help avoid these kind of situations.
Totally. I'm very open to brainstorm on this and suggestions. I think we just want to make sure we thread the line between people wanting to keep their actions private and people also wanting to have that be portable across applications.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
No, thank you. Awesome. Well, we will wrap the call here, folks, and see you all here in a couple of weeks. And again, feel free to ping in the Telegram channel if there's any issues or anything that you see with the migration. Shane will be kicking off the API switchover at 11 today. If you run into any issues or there's any fires, just again, feel free to hail us on Telegram. We'll be watching it very closely.
Big week next week.
Yeah. See you folks.
Exciting. Thanks, everyone.